Hi, welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you've watched my videos before. So I'm going to talk about the books that I am currently reading and plan to read over the next few weeks. With things going on in the world, like Americans having their SNAP benefits end at the same time as Trump throws a very extravagant Great Gatsby themed party, the AI bubble, and making these deals with each other which are very much questionable. And last week I remember seeing the CFO of OpenAI hint at a potential government bailout. And at the same time we have war, genocide, just a really scary world right now. And with all of that going on, I am just not in a place where I particularly want to read nonfiction. I want to read fiction and I want to escape the craziness that is our current society. My one exception for that is I do have a few nonfiction books I'm reading that relate to religion, because religion and spirituality is one area that gives me hope. And I also am going to still be reading philosophy. So on that note, I'm going to start with the book that I have started reading and I'm the furthest through, and that is The Apology by Plato. This is typically included in a collection of dialogues called The Last Days of Socrates. I only intend to work through The Apology. What The Apology is essentially Socrates has been put on trial for corrupting the youth, among other things, and this is his defense during the trial, and he essentially explains his actions and explains why he does the things that he does. I'm interested in it because it actually has a very interesting exploration of Socrates' conception or arguments about God. One of the allegations against him is that he's an atheist. And Socrates goes on to say that no, he's not an atheist, he just has a different conception of God. Throughout the dialogue, Socrates is continuously speaking of one God. I think I'm like 70% of the way through it, so I'll probably finish tomorrow or Wednesday. Okay, now let's talk about classics. Then I'm going to talk about the rest of the fiction books I'm reading. Then I'm going to talk about plays, and then I'm going to talk about nonfiction. I am currently reading Persuasion by Jane Austen. I do think I've talked about this on this channel before. I had tried to read it a few months ago. I also tried to read it last year. I was looking on my Goodreads. I actually have read this before. I read it in like 2014. I do not remember it at all. So I have been wanting to read Jane Austen for a while. I do really like her writing style. I just couldn't really get into a lot of her novels. I realized that this one was written later in her life, and the storyline is just something I feel like I align with a little bit more. I think I struggled with it before because I was trying to listen to it as an audiobook. I think it's better as a physical book to read as opposed to listen to. And Jane Austen has a very beautiful writing style. I would say this is a good book if you are trying to get into writing, because her writing is very beautiful and very succinct, very clear, very poetic. So this follows a character whose name is Anne, who had met a man when she was much younger. She was 19, she'd fallen in love and had wanted to marry him, but her father and a family friend that she really looks up to both did not recommend the marriage, mainly because he didn't come from money. He was a captain, I believe, or he was in the Navy, and they just didn't feel like he was a good prospect for her. They wanted someone who had wealth and had esteem. Anne is 27 and she is still single, and she crosses paths with this gentleman again, and she just, the overall feeling of regret and second chances and all of that sort of thing. I'm liking it so far. I wouldn't say I'm loving it. Like, I can understand why I never finished it, but I have really been wanting to get into writing. I've been wanting to start a Substack or something like that, and I had wanted to read classics that would allow me to feel like I'm able to articulate my thoughts in a better way, and this feels like it's gonna help with that. So I'm enjoying it for that reason. I am, I think, on the 3rd chapter. I didn't read it today, but I read a few chapters yesterday and I quite liked it. Next is War and Peace by Tolstoy. I genuinely, like, I don't want to read this, but I try every year to read a long classic, and I realized as this year is ending I haven't done that yet this year, and I have really been wanting to read War and Peace. So last year I read Anna Karenina by Tolstoy, and the year before I read The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. I do really enjoy Russian literature, and I feel like once I finish this one, I think I'm gonna move on to a long classic that is not Russian. So I just feel like I need to read it. I need to finish it, and we have 2 months left of this year, so I'm hoping I can finish it before the end of the year. I have read a chunk, like I think I was like 100 or 200 pages into it. I brought this with me last year when I went on a cruise for 1 week, and I thought I could get through it and just didn't enjoy it. So this is one of those ones that it's like a marathon. Like, you don't really enjoy the process, but you're really glad that you finish it. I do find this period of time very interesting. It is dealing with the Napoleonic Wars, and you know, there are all these conversations about Napoleon and whether he's the Antichrist, and the impact of the war and the impact it's having on people within Russia, and you know, there are these conversations about politics of the time which are quite interesting. It does have some really beautiful quotes, and I think it deals quite well with this issue of how does one go about living their everyday life when something like a huge world war is happening, or I think for modern day when there's genocide, when there's so much happening in the world that is really destructive and really sad. How does one go about, you know, going to, you know, fancy dinner parties and talking about things that feel very insignificant in the grand scheme of things. So that is why I'm picking this up. I am going to force myself to get through the really boring war scenes, which are very, very, very boring. So yeah, that's like a personal challenge to myself. That's not really a book that I'm looking forward to reading. I am also wanting to read Silence by Shūsaku endō, and this was made into a film by Martin Scorsese. I picked up this edition because it has an introduction by Scorsese, which I've really been wanting to read. So this follows these Jesuit priests. I believe they live in Portugal, and they go to Japan because a priest, he went to Japan to evangelize the people, and he disappeared. He was writing letters back to people in Portugal, and all of a sudden he stopped. So they go to find him. They also go there to strengthen the Christian church, because at this period of time the Japanese leaders were persecuting Christians. And so it's very much a book about religion, about faith, about silence, you know, praying to God and not hearing anything and wondering, is God listening? Is God there? So I've watched the movie by Martin Scorsese and I love it. It's very slow and very brutal, but I think it just raises such fascinating questions about God and about faith. I'm very interested to see how it compares to the movie. I like doing those sort of comparisons, and if you're interested in, like, if you struggle with your religion or with your faith, and if you have questions about, you know, how can there be all this suffering while there is a God, I think books like this are really helpful for that. Okay, I have also been really into Shakespeare over the past like 2 weeks. So I'm gonna just keep leaning into it, and hopefully it continues, because there are a lot of plays of Shakespeare that I've been wanting to read and have just like never gotten around to. So I finally watched and also was reading Julius Caesar. I can't remember what edition of the play I watched. I really had been wanting to watch the one with Marlon Brando, but I just can't find it online anywhere. So I watched one that's just available on YouTube. I was really liking it, but then towards the end, for some reason, the subtitles changed to German instead of English, and I was struggling because I really enjoy watching with subtitles. So I will probably reread the last few acts. But I have, I would say, finished Julius Caesar. I just recently started Antony and Cleopatra, which I can't remember where I found it. It might be on Tubi, but I put it on pause because I first want to try Henry VIII. I actually have watched a BBC edition of this and I really enjoyed it, but for some reason I can't find that version anywhere except for a particular form of BritBox that I can't get a free trial of. So anyway, I am watching an edition which was done in Canada, and I'm not liking it, but I will finish it. There's something about Shakespeare that it just feels like the plays need to be said with a British accent, but maybe that's my personal bias. So I am going to read the end of Julius Caesar. I'm going to finish watching Henry VIII, and then I'm going to watch Antony and Cleopatra. I think realistically those are probably the 3 I'll get through in November. Outside of that, I think is just the few nonfiction books that I am working through. I am still working through the history of Christianity. I don't think I'm going to finish that this year, and I'm okay with it. I really want to like it, but I'm just not enjoying it at all. So I'm not really going to talk about that one. I'm reading one book on the Bible. Let me just get the name. It's not amazing, but I don't really think it's possible to have a book like this that is very interesting. So I'm reading A History of the Bible by John Barton. So the first part of it looks at the history of the Hebrew Bible within Christianity, known as the Old Testament. And then the second part of it is looking at the history of the New Testament. He talks a lot about historically, how can we know some of the things in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament are true. And so he kind of goes and talks through different books of both Bibles and talks about what we do know is true based off of history, what we can't verify as being true. So that part of it I found very interesting. And then he spends a lot of time talking about the actual creation of the text. So how did it get decided that these books make up the Hebrew Bible? How did it get decided that these books make up the New Testament? That part also I didn't know about, and so I found it very interesting from a history perspective. I will add that this is actually written by an Anglican priest. I think he lives in England, but if you are an atheist, I think you would actually like this book because it doesn't feel biased. He's very clear about all of the things that cannot be verified, all of the things that are a little bit questionable. I don't know if it necessarily was what I was looking for, but I will finish it just to say I've done it, and like I said, there is information in it that is interesting. The other one I was reading is a book on Muhammad. I think her name is Karen Armstrong. I had been spending a bit of time watching the Great Courses and listening to the Great Courses, and I had been watching and listening to one that was about Islam, and I particularly was interested in the 5 pillars of Islam. And then when I started learning more about that, I was like, oh, I kind of want to learn more about the Prophet Muhammad and like the history behind the Prophet Muhammad and the history behind the creation of the Quran. So that's why I started reading this book, and it was one that was available from the library very easily. I'm not sure if this was like the perfect book to go with, and I almost feel like a documentary might have been a little bit better. I'm just like a very visual person, and I think because I'm not getting the visuals, I'm struggling a little bit with this book, but I will finish it. I will also add, I'm not a huge biography person, which this very much is. Not the kind of book that for me I like can't put down, but I do think it's information that is useful. So those are 2 nonfiction books that I'm working through. I don't know if I'll finish both of them this month. I definitely will try to finish at least one of them. I will say one positive that's come out of the last few weeks is mamdani being elected in New York. I'm so happy for people who are in New York. And I saw that Lina is like part of his transition plan, and we love Lina over here, so super happy about that. And it's nice to see that like positive things are happening in all of the chaos and the sadness and the destruction. So I think I've talked long enough. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to my channel, this channel is all about re-education and decolonizing the mind. I decided to create this channel 2 years ago actually, when I was going on a journey of re-education and decolonizing my own mind, and I created this channel as a way to share what I was reading and learning with the world. If you are interested in following along with me on this journey, feel free to subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.